So you might remember that we've just spent the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, in one variant of lockdown or another. And you might particularly remember, given that it's coming up to Christmas, that this is going to be the anniversary of a Christmas when we were all told by government, under threat of prosecution, that we were not allowed to see our family, we were not allowed to go for Christmas dinner with our grandparents, we were not allowed to go out to the pub with our parents or our siblings or our loved ones or anything like that, because government said no, or indeed our friends. I assume we have any of those. We weren't allowed to do any of this stuff at all because the government said so, because it was necessary, they said, to stop the spread, despite the fact that we were promised that 2 weeks of lockdown would do that back in the summer. But nevertheless, it shouldn't come as any surprise to you at all, because anyone who looks at politics and actually pays attention to government would have seen this coming from a mile off. But lo and behold, the government did not follow the advice it threatened you by law with if you didn't comply with. Because the government, not just the government, but Boris Johnson himself, in number 10, the seat of the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's own private residence, held a party at Christmas last year in complete flagrance of the guidance and the law that they themselves had set out, which rather gives the impression that it's one rule for them and it's another rule for everybody else. So as this article in is this the Telegraph or the BBC?
BBC.
There's an article in the BBC says, there's actually a video evidence now of a press secretary laughing about this, which again, why should we take anything they say seriously about coronavirus, given that they don't take it seriously because they laugh whenever they're caught breaking the story?
It completely undermines the whole point about British parliamentary democracy, that the Prime Minister is not above the law, that he's just basically an ordinary chap or chapess in number 10 Downing Street who, once they are voted out, goes on and lives an ordinary life. The behaviour that Boris Johnson evinced last Christmas is much more, Banana Republic stuff. It's quite worrying.
No, it really is. Dominic Cummings has suggested that one of the reasons this has taken so long to come out is that it wasn't just politicians there, but it was members of the media as well, which is why they're quite reluctant to place as much emphasis on it, because some of the earliest and most flagrant breaches of this law were by journalists. Just remember Kay Burley at Sky, who and what was the other one, that really insufferably gobby northern one, whose name I don't remember, Beth Rigby, who every day there was a press conference, Beth Rigby would be there saying, why didn't you lock down sooner? Why didn't you lock down harder? And then her and Kay Burley were just going out on the town for Kay Burley's 79th birthday, or well, she looks at least that old. I think it was about her 50th or her 60th, but nevertheless, they were out boozing whilst we were all told that if we went to a pub we'd be locked up. Not in a lock-in, which is the only acceptable way, but as the BBC reports, at the time this party was alleged to have happened, the government's coronavirus guidance specifically stated that people should not have Christmas parties, and gatherings in London of 2 or more people indoors was banned unless it was reasonably necessary for work, if you scroll down a little bit. On the 19th of December, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that strict lockdown rules would be in place over the Christmas for parts of England, meaning many could not see relatives over the festive period. But in a clip leaked to ITV, this is a mock press conference, because they're trying to set up an American-style press conference system with an official press secretary. They did a mock version of this when a mock question was asked of a number 10 employee. And serious though this story is, because it means the government has broken its own law and its own guidance, they were just laughing about it.
Yeah, well, let's
play
watch
the video.
That,
play the video. This is how seriously they take what they tell us.
Reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas?
What's the answer?
I don't know. It
wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not.
Is cheese and wine all right? No. It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
This is recorded. It's fictional party.
Yeah, this is recorded. Stupid cow.
It was not socially distanced.
There we are. That's what they think of us.
That's what they think of us. Now, to be honest, people who are being, or at least I think they're more than affecting it. People who are outraged about this on Twitter, for instance, especially when they're coming from the left or when they're Labour Party apparatchiks. I know Angela Rayner has been complaining that she was apparently the only person in the country not invited to the party. I wonder why. But nevertheless, all these people saying, how dare the government break its own rules, its own guidance? We are shocked. We are outraged. Okay, if you accept, because these people spend all of their time criticising government. They're supposed to be politically astute. They've been telling us for years that Boris Johnson and his cabinet is corrupt, is full of cronies, they're incompetent, they don't follow their own advice, etc. Ad nauseum. They all say all of this. And then when Boris Johnson announces lockdown restrictions over Christmas, they all say, yes, we absolutely must do exactly what this government we've already admitted is corrupt tells us to do. And then it turns out the corrupt government is corrupt, and they say, how dare they break their own rules? Well, some of us just skipped the middle bit. Some of us just said, yeah, the government is full of shits. No, they don't have the right to say this to us. I'm going to go and celebrate Christmas anyway, and sod you. And, oh look, I'm not at all surprised when it turns out the government wasn't taking seriously the thing it told us we had to take seriously. So there's an element of, if not mock outrage, then just, you shouldn't be outraged, because it's just a logical consequence of what you've been saying about this government for ages anyway. And it's another reason why you should not pay any attention to them from this moment on. You should have stopped paying attention to them months ago. Whenever they come out and say some new grand restriction must be placed on your life to stop the spread of a virus that kills 0.7% of the people it infects, no, just tell them to fuck off. Why are you taking them seriously?
I couldn't agree more. The Labour leader Keir Starmer said the government broke the rules, they partied, and now they're laughing. He accused the Prime Minister of taking the public for fools and said he should tell the truth and apologise. Yeah, I agree with Keir Starmer. He's not particularly good at capitalising on a scandal or sleaze, as he
No, he's
would put
awful.
it.
He's awful at it.
He's awful at capitalising on anything. But no, I agree with him. Ian Blackford said the Prime Minister must remove himself from office immediately. A bit dramatic, perhaps. If it was true that there was a Downing Street Christmas party that was not socially distanced last year, and so on and so forth, there's all this outrage, much of which, as you say, is perfectly genuine.
There is a really simple question that needs to be posed to Boris Johnson. Did you break a serious law, or was the law you put in place not serious? Because
Yes,
there's no way he
that's a
comes
very
out of
good way
this
of
well.
putting it.
That's all you need to ask him. Because if he broke a serious law, he should resign. But if
But what's really annoying about Boris Johnson is that he clearly thinks, you can see it in his face, in his conduct, every time a scandal, and it's not the biggest scandal that's ever broken around Boris Johnson, but it is a particularly, I think, poignant's the wrong word, but it's a particularly, sore one at the moment, given that Christmas is coming up again.
But also what he
What was
made
it?
us all go through. So
Yeah.
there have been kind of
But
instances
you
before.
can tell that he thinks he's going to get away with it because he always has gotten away with it. He thinks that if he just gives it all, his haughty-taughty tour act and, tries to deflect attention by appearing in a police uniform with a beanie on somewhere, about how he's going to tackle cannabis and cocaine.
We're coming on to that.
Which we'll come on to. He thinks if he can just play his ridiculous Subwoodhouseian act, he can literally shrug off anything that's thrown at him, and he shouldn't be able to. He should not be allowed to.
No, there have been instances that there is an ordinary level of government hypocrisy and corruption, and stories when the non-issue about the repapering of Downing Street, which Keir Starmer for some reason still insists on bringing up, which nobody gave a damn about. That's such a Westminster Village story. Nobody cares. But this one does, and I will dismiss those. I've dismissed them all the time because they keep coming up, and they're just nonsense. It's just Westminster gossip. It's name calling. It's playground crap. But this one does feel different, precisely because this isn't just, oh well, Boris Johnson is spending more money than is sensible at a time when he's asking everyone else to keep their wallets tight. This is more than that. This is, you are not allowed to see your families at Christmas. This is unprecedented government intervention in the ordinary lives of individual human beings. The complete obliteration of freedoms which we have assumed are ours by right, because they are, which have never been called into question before. Completely unprecedented in the history of British democracy, with the arguable exception of the Second World War. And even then, during the Second World War, there was no law saying that pubs had to shut, for instance, or that you couldn't see family for Christmas. So having done all of this unprecedented break with the tradition of liberty in this country, freedom, and the division between the political and the personal realms, then he goes and just says, yeah, but none of that applies to me. So in a way, it is frivolous in a sense. It's a party. Parties are always frivolous, but also it's incredibly serious. It's a profound indictment of the policy he's forced everyone to live under for the better part of 2 years, with the threat of fines and imprisonment if we say no.
An indictment on the policy, but on him morally, and upon the journalists and other members of parliament and staff who conspired in it, to be perfectly honest. A current serving minister has told me,
Laura
the
Kuenssberg.
writer of the article, Laura Kuenssberg, yes, here we are. It is appalling, and a senior backbencher said it would be catastrophic for the government. Well, we'll see. We'll see if
As another
that
senior
turns out to
cabinet
be the
minister
case.
told a journalist on Twitter, "We're fucked," which I think puts it
What
more succinctly.
about this story?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would like to see Boris Johnson try to cancel Christmas this year because, well, hopefully, en masse, people would just say get fucked. It would be really depressing if we didn't and we just generally obeyed him.
But we should have done what I, for one, did last year, which is just to act as though I'd already said that. I didn't pay any attention to coronavirus guidelines last year. We went to my grandparents and had Christmas dinner, as we always do.
Yeah, no, same. I didn't pay any attention to it whatsoever.
Government is it's just when a government is so fundamentally unserious, you have a moral obligation to pretend as though it doesn't exist. People in South Europe do this all the time with the stupid laws their governments put in place on them and the ludicrous tax regimes they have to suffer under. They just pretend the laws don't exist and go about their business. That is what you should do. Whenever there is a government which is overbearing, you should ignore as much of it as you need to do to reduce it to the level it should be at, which is to say much smaller and less involved in your life.
Yes. Well, the article goes on saying much the same thing. Everyone's outraged. Government needs to get in front of this story and take it seriously rather than allow this to drift and allow this to continue to be a distraction. Typical language here. It's not a distraction. It's quite crucial. There he is, the hypocrite himself. I hate his guts so much that it would be best to pass over his picture before I vent my spleen. The Mirror said last year's official Downing Street Christmas party was cancelled due to restrictions, but staff held an unofficial gathering. It's still breaking the rules. Party games were played, food and drink was served. The party went on past midnight, and that several dozen people attended. Boris Johnson, though, said he was satisfied no COVID rules were broken. How can that possibly be the case? It is, as this big stand first. Is that stand first?
Yes. Or
Yes.
subheading, anyway.
Subheading ballistic. But it's more of the same down here. Drinks and snacks were brought by those attending. No outside guests or supporting staff were invited or present.
We are all
And
battening
so
down the hatches. It's indefensible, a government figure has said. And apparently the chief
Yeah.
had gone ballistic with number 10, as well he should do. Spokesperson for
Yes.
the education department said a gathering was held for those who were already in the office and who couldn't work from home. Drinks and snacks were bought by those attending. No outside guests or supporting staff were invited or present. While this was work-related, in the sense that the office Christmas do is work-related, looking back, we accept it would have been better not to have gathered in this way at that particular time. Yeah, no shit.
Honestly. But this all segues very nicely into the general hypocrisy that we're seeing at the highest levels in government.
Yes,
and
because you
in
mentioned
Parliament.
Boris donning a police outfit to go on a drugs bust.
Yes. So, speaking of hypocrisy in the Telegraph, so Boris Johnson has been glimpsed, I suppose one should say, somewhere in England, somewhere up. No, it was in Essex, wasn't it? Was it in Essex? I think it was in Essex. Wearing a police uniform of kinds with a sort of big, ridiculous beanie. You can tell that he's got this very manicured, unmanicured image that he's still sort of plying.
Incidentally, impersonating a police officer is against the law.
Yes. And his whole sort of moral crusade now, it would seem, not that there's a moral vertebrae in Boris Johnson's jellyish body, is rooting out cocaine specifically, but drugs in general, including cannabis, including county lines, drug gangs, drug trafficking. That's his thing at the moment. It's hugely cynical. Ministers and prime ministers do this all the time when they want to distract from something more important, or
For
when they need to be
instance,
seen.
their own drug use is reported by the Telegraph here.
Their own drug use, and it never amounts to anything. There's no political will in Westminster whatsoever to tackle drugs in this country at all.
No, because they're all on it. I mean, as the Telegraph here reports, so there have been drugs. It's not the first time this has happened either. So drugs have been found on the parliamentary estate. The Telegraph says that they were just simply detected in the House of Commons. Other reports have said that they were found in and around the Prime Minister's office in Parliament as well. Sniffer Dogs now, the speaker is in discussions about the deployment of Sniffer Dogs precisely because there is so much cocaine littered around. It's in all of the toilets. It's everywhere. So Lindsay Hall, as the Telegraph reports, will sit down with authorities to discuss Westminster's drug culture. It shouldn't have a drug culture. Why are you discussing it? Just say no, is the old government-funded advert I seem to recall having seen.
It's such a miserable use of the word culture as well. It's so dismal. The parliamentary authorities are also set to conduct their own testing on a number of locations on the estate, which Sunday Times reported had shown evidence of Class A drug use where detection wipes were used. The move has been prompted after the newspaper revealed that Commons officials had received reports last month that cannabis could be smelt in the open space between Portcullet House and 1 Parliament Street.
To be fair, that thing reeks and it floats and it lingers. That could have come from 2 miles away. And also, it's London. Is there any street where you can't smell it?
As Peter Hitchens said either today or yesterday on, I think it was LBC, that the whole of London stinks of marijuana unless there's a strong wind blowing to disperse the vapours, the fumes. No, London's full of it. I lived in London for 8 years, mercifully no longer, and by the time I'd left, it was pretty much guaranteed that every time I went to so much as the corner shop, I would get a good nostrilful of the stench of cannabis. And given that this is a drug that is increasingly correlated with violent crime and permanent mental health problems, one would have thought that, our leaders would take it rather more seriously, but they would appear to be smoking it themselves on the estate.
It would explain an awful lot of their decisions.
It would explain an awful lot of their decisions and an awful lot of their behaviour as well. So now might be a good time.
Let's go with this. There was another thing I wanted to come on to
This is
from the Telegraph.
Michael Gove recently.
Heap misery on the people of this country.
Absolutely off his face, as
I mean,
we
he
can
might
see.
just be drunk, but given that he and Boris Johnson have both admitted to having used cocaine in the past, so it could also be that. We can't say either way. It would be wrong to say either way, but he's on something, booze or something else. I don't know if there's more to the Telegraph article if you want to scroll down.
There is indeed.
Traces of cocaine reportedly identified in lavatories nearest the private offices of Boris Johnson, as we've said, and Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, as well as a disabled bathroom near to Labour's shadow cabinet offices, so they're all fucking at it. Tests were all carried out on the same evening using cocaine detection swipes, then more often used in nightclubs and bars to identify and minimise on-site drugs consumption, and several sources also alleged casual cocaine use by a group of MPs, with one that's just the shadow cabinet, with one stating they had seen an MP openly snorting cocaine at a party, while another said they had been told of a member of staff walking in on their MP doing a late-night line at their desk.
Blimey. The moral rot. I can only imagine what the Victorians, who I suppose had their own drug problems, I can only imagine what the Victorians would make of this lot. But it's so sordid and morally reprobate. It's one thing to do this stuff. It's another thing to lecture other people not to do it. It's bad whoever's doing it. Cocaine is a terrible drug.
No, it's not good. But there are plenty of instances of this, past and present. The government is increasingly, as we sort of said at the top, masquerading this attempt to, at least to be seen to be doing more to tackle drug use and county lines drug gangs, for instance. I'm sure that there is some measure put in place that ties drug use to driving licenses or something like that, so it's supposed to be an official mark on your record. Again, it's another example of a rule applying to us that doesn't apply to them. And the most ridiculous example I can think of recent times that was Keith Vaz back in the day, who was for all anybody knew about him, was a happily married man. He was a small businessman. He was a Labour Party MP of long standing in Leicester East. Now his seat is occupied by Claudia Webb. So good fucking luck, people of Leicester East. And he was also chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and it's the Home Affairs Select Committee which is responsible for listening to all the latest evidence on drugs and informing Parliament on drugs policy. It was the Home Affairs Select Committee that repeatedly argued against or found against arguments for more legalisation of cannabis. Not that we needed it, because it's de facto decriminalised anyway. But the Home Affairs Select Committee frequently found out against attempts to liberalise laws around cocaine and other Class A drugs. And Keith Vaz, who was the chair of that committee, was rumbled one evening offering to buy first poppers and then cocaine to 2 rent boys he'd invited to his house. So it's the man, ostensibly nice, happy, conservative-ish family man, in charge of drugs, a large part of drugs policy, finding frequently against the right of other people to use drugs, who was cheating on his wife with rent boys and bribing them with drugs.
Did he stay with his wife?
I don't know, but he did at least have the good grace to stand down, first from the committee and then from his seat. So I don't know. I'd like a law. Maybe it's
Yes,
some
not
kind
a
of
good grace that Claudia Webb has shown, it must be
No,
said.
no, but it just reflects the terrible judgment of the people of Leicester East, who most of whom are probably on cocaine. But it would be nice if there were an equivalent thing. Some politicians should propose a motion in the House of Commons, especially now when it's another example of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is in the limelight. Politicians always react to events. They never preempt them. Given that it is an event to which they want to be reacting, if a Labour Party MP stood up and said, we should have a new rule or regulation passed within Parliament that if ever any MP is found to have taken drugs whilst they're serving, or perhaps even within 5 years of serving, they should stand down. Because the government, being cowardly and needing to react to events, would probably say yes to this, and therefore you'd be erecting the noose above them and just inviting them to hang themselves with it. And I bloody well wish they would, figuratively,
Me too.
obviously. But under freedom of information law, what was that? Shows that drug what up. Under 17 drug crimes in or near the parliamentary buildings in the past year. Police investigated 38 drug offences on the estate. 38 between 2015 and 2018. So 38 offences within 3 years. I mean, there are East London tower blocks with a lower drug bust rate than that. Parliament has 19,000 pass holders who can enter, etc. Only about 3,000 have been routinely attending the site. All of the visitors must... So it's not even as though it's a huge number of people to search. There's only been 3,000 of them there, so just search them. All of the visitors have the bag search, etc. And a common spokesperson said that Parliament takes the issue of substance misuse very seriously, because it very seriously enjoys misusing drugs. And should drug use be identified in Parliament, appropriate action would be taken. Any allegation of criminal behaviour would be a matter for the Metropolitan Police, who are not interested, by and large, in drugs at all.
It's doubly depressing because this is all focusing on the second half of the equation, which is the legality and the consequences, as opposed to the first and primary problem of the morality of this. It's one thing for people to see that the police are going to crack down on this, if indeed they will. This depends, it would seem, on Lindsay Hoyle's attitude to this, but that's one thing. That's not going to efface the knowledge that we're now privy to, which is that, as if we weren't already privy to it, really, that hundreds of MPs potentially are basically moral sewers, and hypocritical moral sewers at that.
Yeah, this
and
is the reason why
no
my
amount of
suggestion
investigation
wouldn't work.
will stop that.
No, it's the reason why my suggestion wouldn't work, because the Labour Party can't put forward a policy which says if anyone in the parliamentary state is found taking drugs, they will stand down, because that would mean that probably half the Labour Party would also have to stand down.
Yeah.
So there is no effective means of prosecuting this beyond getting sniffer dogs in, and even then, you sort of suspect they'll find some way of covering up anyone serious who is found to have brought anything dodgy onto the estate.
I was discussing revolution earlier with my father, in fact, and I was describing to him how in the 1830s, this country, not having quite got underway on the Industrial Revolution yet, in the 1830s, this country was in serious danger, it seemed at the time, and most historians would concur. In serious danger of revolution. The Germans had a revolution in 1848. The French had not had one too long ago. Well, I forget how many revolutions the French have had, but generally there's the one that we all refer to. But in the 1830s, this country was a powder keg. There were a few, I think, assassination attempts on Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. There was huge unrest, massive poverty. And yet we didn't have one because this country is really good at allowing its existing institutions to accommodate slowly and often violently, yes, but accommodate the demands that need to be met. It's that old saying from, it was the old Labour leader who said something about England being new wine in old wineskins or something like that, from the biblical passage. But I digress. Reading this stuff, it does make me, in a weird kind of way, angry at the British people that it takes. I'm not saying revolutions are good, because they're more often than not good. But it does make me angry that we don't show more visceral anger at this kind of behavior. How much do we need to be put down? How much do we need to be suppressed? How much do we need to be taken for granted? Particularly, as you said earlier, after the unprecedented, for 2 years now, unprecedented intrusions into our historic liberties with the lockdown measures. How much do we need to put up with this as a sort of cherry on top, I suppose, and the Christmas party? How much do we need to put up with before we turn around and say, actually, you know what? Um, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're going to maybe take a leaf out of the French book
What's that
and
old American film? I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
yeah. You can't handle the truth. Different movie, but it comes to mind. No, it's I don't know. We're complacent isn't the word, but we do take rather a lot, I think, and we shouldn't.
No, we should absolutely
And
stop. But we don't need a revolution. Just yeet them. The next time there is an election, get rid of the whole lot of the fuckers and actually elect somebody in
vote
who's
SDP.
halfway decent. Well, give them time; they'll all be on the drugs as well. But to close, I think there is one fairly famous
Yes. So
example.
this is George Osborne gurning back in 2016 or something. Here we are.
Tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression.
I don't think this wasn't the only time either. I think there were multiple occasions when this was happening.
He's totally out of it.
I would
Look
be
at his hair.
if I had to
I
sit
mean,
next to a.
and his collar. He's clearly been out.
Oh no, yeah, definitely. But I mean, if I had to listen to David Cameron drone on, I would also wear that expression on my face, I think, or take
Yes.
really hard drugs to get over it. He could be on opium, but
They were and remain quite good friends, weren't they?
I think so. But David Cameron is reportedly quite jealous that George Osborne has been much more successful than he has since he left, because George Osborne went and took 6 or 7 quite important, very highly lucrative jobs, whereas David Cameron bought himself £1 million shed in a garden to write an autobiography that nobody wanted to read. So
Yeah, and then
success.
got pulled up for the Greensill stuff.
Yeah.
But it's because George Osborne isn't tainted with the Brexit
No,
decision.
according to that, he's tainted with something very different.
Yes. Oh dear.